When the thunder of siege engines echoed across the battlefield, walls that once seemed impenetrable crumbled like dust beneath their relentless assault. These terrifying weapons didn't just break stone, they shattered the very rules of medieval warfare, forever changing the fate of kingdoms and the lives of those caught in their deadly shadows. The sky hangs heavy with a bruised purple dusk, smoke curling like ghostly serpents from distant battlements battered by relentless siege engines. The air trembles with the distant thunder of great wooden beasts, catapults hurling shattered stones, trebuchets releasing thunderous volleys, and the iron clatter of battering rams pounding against ancient gates. Amid the swirling dust and ash, a lone soldier leans against the crumbling wall, his breath shallow beneath the weight of his mail and the heavy scent of sweat and soot. His eyes, glazed with fatigue, reflect the fiery glow of burning timber and the cold, unforgiving steel that men have forged to conquer. The stench of smoke, wet earth, and blood clings to every surface, as if the land itself mourns the violence tearing through its heart. This is not mere war. It is an elemental storm where survival depends on more than courage. It hinges on the terrifying machines that twist the fate of kingdoms, the clamor of voices, commands shouted in harsh tongues, and the rhythmic pounding of wheels grinding over stone weave into a dissonant hymn of destruction and desperation. Each volley from the trebuchet strikes like the bellows of death itself, hurling great boulders that shatter walls and splinter wood, turning once proud fortresses into shattered ruins. The ground shakes with the weight of iron-tipped battering rams, their relentless assault carving rhythm into stone gates, relentless and unforgiving. Nearby, archers scramble beneath battered walls, arrows drawn taut against the coming storm of fire and shrapnel. The air tastes bitter, filled with the acrid smoke of burning thatch and the sharp bite of fear. Within this chaos, the soldiers' fingers brush against a rusted iron key hanging from his belt, a fragile symbol of hope, a promise of doors still locked, lives still hidden. That key, worn smooth by trembling hands, holds memories of a world before the siege, quiet chapels, soft prayers whispered beneath the weight of night, and laughter that once echoed through stone halls, now trembling with threat. The key is a tether to the past, a silent prayer that the fortress might yet hold, that behind these shattered battlements, life clings fiercely to its last embers. The siege engines are cruel sentinels of change, their monstrous forms looming against the twilight sky like mechanical beasts birthed from human ingenuity and desperation. These machines are not mere tools, but harbingers of a new era where war is no longer fought by swords alone, but by the cold, merciless will of engineered destruction. Their wooden limbs creak and groan under tension, ropes coil like serpents, ready to unleash death, and iron weights drop with a sound like thunder breaking the heavens. The clash of man and machine echoes through the valley, a terrible song of progress and ruin intertwined. Each shattered stone and smoldering beam tells a story of fear and endurance, of kingdoms caught in the relentless march of technology that reshapes the very meaning of battle. Behind every thrown rock lies the hopes of a desperate commander, the prayers of peasants hiding beneath rubble, and the shattered dreams of knights who once held honor above all else. The siege is a crucible, burning away old ways and forging a world where survival demands more than bravery. It requires adapting to the cold, mechanical fury that does not tire, does not hesitate, does not forget. As night deepens, the glow of burning wood flickers against the walls, like the last flickers of a dying candle, fragile and fleeting. The soldier straightens, his body aching, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the shadows of the machines stretch long and dark. The key at his side weighs heavy, not only with iron but with the weight of a world slipping into a new age, an age where every fortress might fall and every life might be broken beneath the wheels of these monstrous engines. In this moment, the siege is more than destruction, it is transformation. The old codes of chivalry and honor bend beneath the grinding gears of war's new face. The walls crumble, but within the ruins lies a question whispered through the smoke and ash. How long can the world hold on to its past when the thunder of these engines shakes the very foundations of medieval life? The night swallows the battlefield, but the echoes of stone on stone, wood splintering and iron striking never cease. They carry with them the story of a brutal dawn, the birth of mechanized terror that will forever change the fate of those who stand behind these battered walls and those who wield the terrible power beyond them. And as the embers fade into cold ash, a silent resolve lingers, fragile yet fierce, a vow to endure amid the ruin, to live on when the machines fall, silent and the dust finally settles. A cold wind whistles through the battered remnants of a shattered village, carrying the acrid bite of smoldering wood and the bitter temps of spilled blood. The earth lies scarred and broken beneath a sky thick with smoke, where the flicker of torchlight struggles against encroaching darkness. Amid this ruin, a weary engineer crouches beside a tangled mess of ropes and pulleys, his hands stained with pitch and grime as he tightens the cords that will send death soaring through the air. Each knot is deliberate, a fragile promise woven from sweat and hope, binding the fragile fate of man to the unforgiving rhythm of war. Around him, hollow shells of catapult stones lie like sleeping giants, their rough surfaces scarred by the fury of battles past, silent witnesses to destruction and despair. The engineer's face is a map etched by exhaustion and grim resolve, shadows cast by the flickering flames dancing across the splintered timbers. Deep lines trace the paths of sleepless nights and memories heavy with loss, bearing the weight of lives shattered beneath the wheels of monstrous machines. His breath mingles with the harsh symphony of war, the groan of massive wooden arms pivoting into place, the sharp bark of commanders shouting orders through smoke-thick air, the labored breaths of a dying horse tangled in harness, its agony a stark reminder of the cost behind every siege. Each creak and moan of timber and chain is a prayer whispered to gods long silent, a plea for mercy from forces wielded by human hands, but born from unyielding iron and ancient wood. Beside him rests a leather-bound journal, its pages worn and stained, filled with sketches of designs and careful notes. This book is more than a ledger of machines. It is the engineer's confession, a testament to hope and despair intertwined. Here lie records of failures, ropes snapping like fragile threads severed by fate, mechanisms buckling under strain, alongside dreams of swift victory that might spare lives or secure the fragile future of a battered kingdom. The twisted timbers and iron chains scattered about are tangled like the fates of those who command these engines. Reminders that the very power to raise walls and crush bones depends on fragile ropes and careful hands. The engineer's fingers linger on the notches worn smooth by years of toil, tracing silent prayers for strength in a world where every victory is paid in blood above the devastation. The night sky is veiled by drifting smoke, stars flickering faintly through the haze like distant promises in a world darkened by fire and ruin. The wind carries the scent of burnt grain and damp earth, whispering through the broken streets and shattered dreams. In the silence between volleys, the engineer's gaze drifts upward, haunted by the question that lingers like a shadow upon his heart. How much more can the earth endure before the old ways collapse beneath the cold, unyielding steel of these monstrous weapons? How many villages must fall? How many souls be consumed before the tide of war becomes a flood impossible to turn? In this moment, caught between the relentless clamor of destruction and the fragile pulse of hope, the engineer embodies the contradiction of his craft, a creator of death who longs for peace, a keeper of secrets who bears witness to ruin. His story is woven into the very ropes he tightens, each twist a silent vow to master the forces that threaten to undo the world he once knew. As the shadows deepen and the echoes of battle fade into night, the fragile balance of power shifts. Once more, carried on the wings of machines, both terrible and magnificent, the camp stirs with muted whispers, soldiers sharing stolen moments beneath the watchful gaze of stars, while the fires burn low and the cold presses in like a living thing. The engineer rises slowly, muscles aching, and steps toward the waiting engines, his breath steady despite the weight of what is to come. Every movement is a testament to survival, a defiance against the darkness that gathers beyond the walls, a quiet rebellion that insists life endures even as empires crumble. The night folds around him like a shroud, but within the silence burns a stubborn ember, a hope that the dawn will bring more than ruin, that the lessons forged in smoke and iron might one day kindle a future beyond war. As the first pale light tinges the horizon, the earth trembles beneath the wheels of progress and destruction intertwined, and the engineer's eyes reflect the fragile line between creation and annihilation, between the legacy of blood and the promise of peace yet to be born. The thunderous roar of a trebuchet's release shakes the earth beneath a gray, storm-laden sky, sending a massive stone arcing over fortress walls like a falling star forged from vengeance. The world trembles with the violence of engineered wrath, the very ground trembling beneath the fury of machines designed to break stone and spirit. Below, a group of monks kneels in solemn prayer, their voices rising in desperate cadence against the chaos, chanting ancient Latin hymns that thread through the smoke-thick air like fragile lifelines. Their thin hands clutch rosaries worn smooth by generations of hope and despair, their threadbare robes heavy with the damp chill that slips through cracked stone and iron-bound gates. The scent of burnt timber and crushed earth lingers in the air, a bitter perfume of destruction and loss that stains the very breath of the fortress. The walls groan beneath the relentless assault, each impact sending shards of plaster and dust into a haze that blots the sunlight and turns the world to muted grays and shadows. The siege is a cruel symphony of fire and stone, where every echo is a dirge for those who once called this place home. Inside the fortress, the air is thick with the weight of prayers offered and promises made beneath flickering candlelight. The monks' voices rise and fall, a fragile shield against the encroaching despair, binding faith to flesh in a desperate grasp for salvation amid the storm. Their murmured pleas are woven with the salt of tears shed silently for lives swallowed by war's unforgiving maw in a narrow chamber overlooking the shattered courtyard. A young noblewoman stands pressed against a cold window, her gaze locked on the monstrous engines of war that claw at the fortress like beasts of iron and wood. Her fingers tighten around a silver locket, the last token of a world slipping further from reach, a fragile tether to memories of peace and laughter, now drowned beneath the roar of siege engines. The metal cools against her palm, a quiet weight that anchors her in the swirling tempest of fear and resolve. Outside, the earth shudders beneath each crashing stone, and the walls shiver with every brutal assault, echoing the lament of innocence lost to fire and blood. Her eyes reflect the dance of smoke and candle flames, flickering with the haunted light of countless nights spent in shadowed vigil. The fortress itself seems to hold its breath, a silent witness to endurance carved from desperation and faith. The noblewoman's heart beats a fragile rhythm beneath the armor of grief and determination, each pulse a whispered vow that no matter how deep the darkness falls, the spirit within will not yield. The air around her is thick with the scent of damp stone, melted wax, and distant rain that weeps for the ravaged lands beyond these walls. As twilight deepens, the shadows lengthen and fold the fortress into a quiet storm of smoke and flickering light, the chorus of prayers softening into a solemn hush. The distant roar of trebuchets grows faint against the rising wind, as if the world itself mourns the relentless passage of destruction. The noblewoman's gaze lifts to the fragile stars, dimmed by gathering clouds, their pale fires flickering like the hope she clings to in the heart of the siege. In that fragile stillness, her silent vow takes shape, an anthem of endurance and loss, a testament to the unyielding will that turns fear into strength. Beneath the cold stone and whispered prayers lies the haunting promise of change, a legacy forged in fire and blood that will ripple through kingdoms and souls long after the siege's last breath has faded. The weight of this night presses heavy, but within its darkness, a flicker of something greater stirs the fragile ember of hope that refuses to be extinguished, even as the world crumbles around it. And as the night deepens, the noblewoman's resolve becomes a quiet beacon, a whispered question lingering in the air. What will remain when the walls finally fall and the silence of war descends upon the broken land? Beneath a sky swollen with rolling gray clouds, the battered gates of a once mighty castle groan beneath the relentless assault of a towering battering ram, each strike sending tremors through cold stone and deep into the hearts of the defenders. Within, the air is thick with the scent of wet earth and crushed timber, mingling with the acrid smoke of flickering torches that struggle against the rising dusk. Outside, the siege engines loom like colossal beasts carved from twisted wood, and iron, their great shadows, stretching long and dark over the blood-stained fields where hope and despair mingle. The heavy thud of the ram pounding the gates cuts through the heavy silence, punctuated by the sharp whistle of arrows and the murmured prayers of men clinging to honor. To survival, within the fortress walls, a small band of armored knights stands, gathered, their faces etched with grim resolve beneath dented helms dulled by dirt and sweat. Their swords, worn from countless battles, are held tight in trembling hands that betray the fierce courage burning beneath their weary exteriors. Each man carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears, fear of death, of failure, of the legacy they will leave behind. The battered banner that flutters weakly above the battlements is a fragile symbol of defiance. Its once vibrant colors now muted by dirt, blood, and relentless despair. Somewhere beyond the walls, the distant clatter of footsteps echoes, the advancing enemy drawing ever closer, their voices a harsh chorus that grates against the silence between the thunderous blows. A young squire stands near the gate, his hands trembling as they clutch a cracked shield, the cold metal biting into his palms like a bitter comfort against the encroaching darkness. His breath comes shallow, mingling with the stale scent of smoke and sweat that clings to the narrow passageways. Every creak of wood and shifting stone seems to carry the weight of stories untold, stories of sacrifice woven into the very fabric of this fortress, stories whispered in moments of quiet terror and fierce loyalty. The silence between the battering ram's blows is heavy with the tension of what is to come, a fragile candle flame flickering against the long night of violence. He hears the muted prayers of his comrades, voices rising in hope and desperation, a fragile chorus woven from the threads of faith and fear. Outside, the machinery of war grinds inexorably onward, ropes stretched tight with the sweat and muscle of men driven by hunger and command. The battering ram swings again and again, a monstrous pendulum of destruction, aiming to tear through wood and iron, to shatter the very heart of the castle's defense. Each strike sends shockwaves through stone and flesh alike, rattling bones and resolve, breaking not only gates, but the brittle barrier between life and oblivion. The air vibrates with a charged stillness, the fragile boundary between defiance and collapse, hanging by a thread worn thin by the brutal rhythm of assault. The ground beneath is churned to mud, soaked with the blood of fallen soldiers and the bitter taste of unfulfilled promises. Within the walls, the knights tighten their grip on sword hilts, their eyes fixed on the crumbling gate as splinters begin to fall like fragments of a fragile past giving way to a merciless future. The tension coils tighter with each shuddering impact, the weight of countless lives pressed into this moment of fracture. A whispered prayer escapes the lips of the oldest among them, not for victory, but for the strength to endure what is to come. The air smells of iron and damp stone, mingling with the faint scent of burned candles and distant rain falling beyond the shattered battlements. Every sound, the clash of steel, the crack of breaking timber, the shouted command, weaves into a tapestry of survival painted in sweat and grit. The young squire's eyes flicker with a mix of terror and fierce resolve, a silent oath forming beneath the roar of destruction. The shield he bears, scarred and battered, is more than metal. It is the fragile armor of hope against a tide that threatens to drown them all. The fortress seems to hold its breath alongside those within, poised on the edge of collapse, caught between the weight of history and the brutal new dawn heralded by the merciless engines of war. Outside, the shadows lengthen as the last light fades, and the relentless pounding of the ram becomes a grim heartbeat, marking the end of one world and the beginning of another. In this moment, suspended between life and ruin, the battered gates begin to splinter, a fracture in stone that mirrors the fracture in the hearts of those who stand behind them. The cold dusk folds the fortress into a shroud of smoke and whispered fears, where every broken timber and shattered plank carries the memory of valor and loss. And as the walls tremble beneath the final, crushing blows, the question hangs heavy. In the air, what remains when the gates fall and the silence of devastation claims the night? A dense fog clings to the marshlands surrounding the beleaguered fortress, swallowing the monstrous shapes of siege towers as they creep forward like giant beasts, slow and inexorable against the ancient stone walls. The air hangs heavy with the briny tank of sea and damp moss, threaded with the metallic sting of spilled blood and the distant clang of hammering. Voices murmur low and taut, men steeling themselves for the storm to come, hearts pounding beneath worn armor as the weight of fate settles with the cold chill in the marrow of the night. Inside the shadowed keep, a weary commander sits hunched over a worn map, his fingers stained with ink and the grime of endless campaigns, tracing lines faded by time and hope. His eyes, tired and haunted, carry the faces of fallen comrades and the ghosts of battles lost beneath the cold calculus of siege and strategy. Outside, the wooden towers groan and creak as they inch closer, their massive frames filled with armored soldiers waiting to pour into the fortress the moment the drawbridge falls. Flickering torches sputter against the damp chill, casting long, sinister shadows that writhe like restless specters upon the weathered stone battlements. The flickering flames dance with whispered threats, illuminating the faces of men gripped by quiet dread and fierce resolve. Somewhere distant, the mournful call of a horn cuts through the murmur like a blade, a reminder that the fragile boundary between defense and destruction thins with every breath. The siege towers are more than mere machines. They are monuments to human desperation, cunning carved from timber and iron, vessels of relentless hunger for dominion that have twisted war into an unyielding crucible of survival. Within the commander's chest, breath catches in a silent prayer that slips into the night, fragile as the flickering flame before it is swallowed by shadow. He braces himself against the cold stone wall, every heartbeat a drumbeat for what is to come. The fog swirls thick around the battlements, blurring the edges of fear and hope as the towering engines of war advance, poised to shatter not just gates and walls, but the fragile souls bound within. The air carries the scent of wet earth and rotting timber, mingling with the distant roar of preparation and the restless shuffling of armored feet. Each movement beyond the veil of mist is a promise of chaos, a silent herald of the brutal reckoning, where wood and steel will carve the fate of kings, peasants, and the dying echoes of forgotten lives. The commander's gaze rises to the shifting horizon, where steel meets sky, eyes tracing the slow crawl of those monstrous towers, now close, enough to hear their groans like the breathing of some ancient beast roused from slumber. In their advance, they carry the weight of empires and shattered dreams, of sacrifices etched in blood, and the relentless march of mechanized death. The fortress holds its breath, poised on the cusp of ruin and resistance, while within these walls the resolve of men and women tightens, like chains forged in fire and fear. The candlelight flickers, the shadows deepen, and in the stillness between heartbeats, a question lingers in the air. How long before the wooden giants break the silence and bring the world crashing down in fire and steel? The fog rolls thicker as night folds the land into silence, and the commander's hand rests lightly upon the map, a tether to a past where hope still breathed freely. The siege towers press onward, relentless as the tide, a haunting silhouette against the murky dark. And as the first cries of battle rise on the wind, the fortress steels itself for the coming storm, for the brutal truth that in this merciless dance of wood and iron, survival demands more than courage. It demands the strength to face the shadows that rise with the dawn. The first light of dawn stretches hesitantly across a battlefield stained deep with blood and sorrow, where shattered siege engines lie abandoned like the broken dreams of those who once wielded them. The earth is a harsh tapestry of mud and blood, cold and unyielding beneath the pale wash of morning. A coppery scent hangs heavy in the air, mingled with the acrid smoke of smoldering wood that curls upward like mournful spirits fleeing the carnage. Above, carrion birds wheel in slow, ominous circles, their cries a haunting elegy for the fallen, weaving through the silence left by battle's thunder now stilled. Amidst this desolation, a lone blacksmith crouches near the remnants of his ruined forge, hands blackened with soot and sweat, a ragged cloth pressed to his brow to wipe away the grime of war. His eyes are worn, shadowed by sleepless nights and the weight of loss. Yet within their depths burns a fierce and unyielding resolve. The fire that once roared like a heart within his forge has been smothered, its ashes cold beneath a sky heavy with smoke and regret. Scattered tools, hammers dulled by use, tongs twisted in the chaos, shards of iron bent beyond repair lie half swallowed by the mud, silent witnesses to the fragile dance between destruction and creation that war demands. His fingers brush lightly over a bent horseshoe, its shape warped but unbroken, a small emblem of endurance amidst the ruin. In that simple curve, there lies a promise that life can be mended, that strength can be reclaimed from ruin. Around him, the skeletal remains of siege weapons stand like fallen giants, their shattered timbers and snapped ropes whispering tales of fury and desperation, a testament to the fragile line that separates triumph from utter collapse. The battlefield seems to hold its breath beneath the long shadows cast by the rising sun, as if the earth itself mourns the terrible cost etched into every stone and scarred blade. The blacksmith's gaze lifts toward the horizon where the sky softens from bruised purple to pale gold, the fragile promise of dawn folding softly into the cold earth. In this quiet moment, his heart beats steady beneath the weight of grief and hope intertwined, a stubborn pulse that refuses to be silenced by loss. The embers of yesterday's fire may have died, but beneath the ashes lies the spark of new beginnings, waiting to be coaxed back to life by hands skilled in both craft and endurance. This forge once the crucible of creation, now bears witness to the toll exacted by war, but it also cradles the quiet strength of those who will rebuild. The blacksmith rises slowly, shoulders heavy but unbowed, the rough leather of his apron worn thin from years of shaping iron and fate alike. His breath hangs visible in the cool morning air as he surveys the shattered landscape, the broken wheels, the splintered beams, the torn banners flapping weakly in the wind. Each fragment tells a story of battle's brutal toll, of hope shattered and lives cast into shadow. Yet within the quiet ruins, there stirs a fierce determination, a will to mend the broken and forge anew. The blacksmith's steps carry him toward the scattered tools, hands steady as he gathers what can be saved, a ritual of survival and remembrance. Each hammer and tong reclaimed is a vow cast in iron, a silent prayer for the strength to rebuild what has been lost. Around him, the morning deepens, birdsong hesitant beyond the distant trees, and the soft rustle of leaves whispers of life, stirring once more beneath the shattered earth. The battlefield, though scarred and silent, is not yet surrendered to oblivion. As the sun climbs higher, the blacksmith's thoughts drift to those who will walk these fields again, children chasing the wind, villagers tending crops where walls once stood, voices rising in laughter instead of war cries. The cruel machines of destruction may have roared their dreadful song, but they cannot drown out the quiet courage of those who endure. The forge may be cold today, but its fire burns eternal in the hearts of those who hold fast to hope. In this fragile dawn, the blacksmith pauses, hands resting on a battered anvil, eyes closed against the rising light. The world lies broken before him, yet beneath the ruin, the promise of renewal stirs like a whispered legend carried on the wind. His breath steadies, a steady rhythm that mirrors the heartbeat of the earth, slow, persistent, unyielding. From the ashes of despair, new stories will rise, forged in the fire of resilience and the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to let the past consume the future. The battlefield's silence is deep, but it hums with the memory of lives lost and the quiet strength of those who remain. And as the first warm light spills across the shattered earth, the blacksmith turns toward the horizon, where the shadows of war begin to yield to the fragile glow of hope. The world may be scarred, but it is not defeated. Tomorrow's dawn will demand new courage, new sacrifices, and the fierce will to rebuild, a promise etched in iron, whispered through smoke, and carried on the breath of the morning wind. The hollow clang of iron chains reverberates softly through the dim, cramped workshop, where an old craftsman bends low over the twisted carcass of a siege engine. His gnarled fingers trace the jagged splinters of wood with a reverence, born from years steeped in both creation and destruction. Candle smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, casting flickering shadows that dance like restless spirits along the cold stone walls, heavy with the burden of centuries. Outside, the mournful toll of a distant bell weaves through narrow, rain-soaked streets, its somber peal a funeral hymn for lives lost and empires broken. The craftsman's eyes, clouded by age yet sharpened by memory, reflect the dying flames flickering low in the hearth. In their depths lie stories carved by fire and iron, brutal innovations that tore through the fabric of kingdoms and shattered the fragile peace of medieval life. The scent of burnt pitch clings to the air, mixed with the cold bite of iron, and the faint musk of aged parchment, all tangled with the lingering sweat of relentless toil. Scattered tools, chisels dulled by use, saws stained with resin, twisted iron clamps rest like ancient relics upon his workbench, silent witnesses to the grim marriage of human ingenuity and merciless destruction. His fingers close around a rusted gear, cold and unyielding, a heavy token of progress forged in the crucible of war. This small fragment holds the weight of countless battles, of wooden arms flung wide and stones hurled with devastating force, of walls broken and lives unmade. It is a symbol of a turning tide, the relentless march of invention that transformed warfare into a new, mechanized nightmare. Yet, beneath this marvel of craft, there lies a darker truth, the price paid in blood spilled upon shattered earth, in families torn apart and futures lost beneath crumbling stones. The room holds its silence like a shroud, folding around the craftsman's slow, measured breaths as he sits amid the relics of terror and endurance. His mind drifts through the shadows of history, recalling the faces of men who wielded these terrible machines, not merely as tools of war, but as instruments of fate. He sees the hope that once shone in their eyes, hope twisted into dread by the cruel efficiency of these wooden beasts. The chains that bind the gears mirror the chains that bind the human spirit, fragile yet enduring beneath the cold weight of inevitability. In the muted glow of candlelight, the craftsman's thoughts wander to the unseen toll exacted by these engines, the children orphaned, the mothers left to mourn beneath storm-dark skies, the villages razed where laughter once blossomed. These machines, born of human hands and bound by iron, have become monuments not only to progress but to loss, standing like silent sentinels over a world forever changed. The clash of wood and metal, once a distant echo, now rings through memory as a harsh dirge for what was sacrificed in the name of power. He lifts his gaze to the window, where night wraps the world in shadow and the faintest glimmer of stars pierces the dark veil. Beyond lies a land transformed, a medieval realm, caught between the fading honor of hand-to-hand combat and the cold calculus of mechanized ruin. The craftsman's breath slows, each exhale a prayer carried into the quiet night, a plea for mercy in a time when mercy has become a rare and precious thing. The gears and pulleys on his bench seem to whisper secrets, fragments of stories hidden beneath layers of grime and rust. They speak of relentless invention, of minds driven by desperation and genius alike, of the fragile dance between creation and destruction. These machines embody the paradox of progress, a double-edged sword wielded by those who sought dominion and found only the shadows of humanity slipping through their grasp as the night deepens. The workshop grows still, save for the faint crackle of dying embers and the soft breath of the craftsman. Lost in a world of memories, both luminous and dark, his hands rest lightly on the splintered frame before him, a silent vow woven between hope and regret. The legacy of these engines is etched not only in stone and steel, but in the souls of those who bore witness, a testament to resilience and the enduring spirit that rises even when the world is shattered by iron and fire. In this quiet moment, the old man leans back, eyes closed against the weight of history pressing like a heavy cloak. The night holds its breath alongside him, cradling the fragile balance between terror and endurance, destruction and rebirth. And as dawn's first light begins to touch the horizon, a whispered question lingers in the shadows. What price will the next dawn demand in this age, forever marked by the machines that changed the face of medieval warfare?